Well, welcome everybody, old friends, new friends, and possible to see you come and join us for this venture. And it's something which we have been passionately interested in, and involves many, many people to put this together. But it's always in our work, it is a kind of improvisation, a best shot of what we can do with our limited resources. And I hope you will forgive technical limitations which we will exhibit in our various processes. So I want to go this bang into it straight away, just to say to people who just come on and saw a glimpse of the photograph. It was taken about 50 years ago now. It's terrible to think how long ago it was. In, of course, at Sherbourne House, run by Mr. Bennett, and it was. A particular movement is called the prayer in six. And I wanted to have it out there as a first impression, just the concreteness of the movements, what they look like, what they feel like. Because I know in our audience here we may have people who know hardly anything about the movements or even maybe never seen them, and others who are far more experienced than me, for example. So I have to address things for the average or the majority of people. This session is to give you a glimpse, and really it's just a bare glimpse, an outline of the kind of history of the movements with their creation by Mr. Gurdjieff, and with some pointers about their nature and the kind of thinking and philosophy behind them. And it is very brief, so forgive me for dealing with very complex subjects in a very fleeting way. I want to begin straight off with a presentation or a comment about what was Gurdjieff's mission. What was he about? And there are various interpretations of this and also various diverse things that he said. But I'm picking on one. And this is a particularly crucial conversation he had with a French scholar, Denis Seurat, in the 1920s, early 1920s. Denis Seurat was a French scholar, as I say, who himself is an author of some incredibly important books, but his speciality was the study of literature in France and England. He was, for example, quite well versed in Milton and Blake, but he regarded Gurdjieff's first magnum opus of writing, Beelzebub's Tales, as an extraordinary achievement, as a genuinely new mythology. And he even went so far as at one point to call it an extraterrestrial mythology. But anyway, these two had a conversation which was recorded, and it came out of it was something said by Gurdjieff, which has been echoed ever since. And it is, I think, supremely important. And it is this. So he gave this formulation, a triadic formulation, because the threefold system and so on, he regarded as primary in one's thinking in his system. And it was to say, he said, take the wisdom of the East and the knowledge of the West, and then search. Now, this is actually a incredibly profound and significant statement because it is a relevant question about understanding these two things. What really is the wisdom of the East? What is really the knowledge of the West? But more importantly of all, that there is search involved. And I want to emphasize this point because there are different, of course, temperaments about people dealing with Gurdjieff's ideas, and there's some temperaments who like to go towards fixation and make it a rigid system which can be owned, possessed, and so on. But others see it as an involvement in a process which is ever creative, ever changing. And in my particular case, I've counted myself lucky working with Mr. Bennett, one of his Goethe's pupils, because he had a scientific background and was ever open to creativity and new discoveries and new interpretations. So this two sides of the wisdom of the East and the knowledge of the West comes out in this question of the movements, because in the early stages, and this is, of course, speaking very roughly of the development, which goes up to the period of in 1923, 24, when he made not the first, but the major demonstrations of his movements to audiences in Paris and in New York and other places. But the very first one had been done in Georgia and Sicily about 10, 15 years before that. But in these, he presented it in this guise of reflecting movements and dances taken from the East and the Far East, and he gave them names and produced this image of discovering these dances in ancient manuscripts and that kind of thing. Whereas later on, his emphasis changed, and there was little reference to this Eastern origin and ethnic origin of the movements, not that he was copying them at all in any way, and it became far more abstract. But keep in mind these two sides of the Western and the Eastern, and it seems that in this statement of his mission to Denizura, he was giving an equal value to these two sides, and this is, I think, extremely important. Now, the other part I want to say about this theoretical or philosophical foundations of his work is this extraordinary thing of insisting that each person is a combination of a small community of three persons. You would say we are three persons in one, not just one. And it's fairly familiar these days, but I'll say it. These are usually construed to be the thinker and the feeler and the mover, thinking, feeling, and moving. Other people have had this system, and Rudolf Steiner, for example, had a similar one, but and for interesting reasons, he called the third one willing. It's not moving. But for the moment, we forget that and stick to Gurdjieff's system. And this, it was remarkable because he insisted on the theme of harmonious development. And this is critical, that he was not concerned with development as such, because all sorts of systems are there for development, but about them in harmony. And this puts a special edge on what he was trying to do, because we can see lots of systems and techniques around about doing things which will help people develop, but they do it in a one-sided kind of way, a one-centered kind of way, so to speak. And you find this in sport and in the arts and even in science, but he wanted the three things. Now, I see our time is already going away, racing away from us. So I want to go back. And the other thing he said about when it came to the movements, which Elan will bring us out, you say the movements are not just about the moving center, the moving part of ourselves, but involve all three, but they are based so much on, obviously, on the body, just as his music is based so much on the feelings and his books on so much on the intellect. But in each three, there are these three elements brought together. And this is the key, he said, to understanding. And in his wonderful second book, Meetings of Remarkable Men, where you get this one meeting he has in Kafiristan to this figure, probably a kind of mythological or invented figure, Father Giovanni, about faith. And he said, faith is a matter of understanding, which is already a thing which most people would balk at, and not say, because they're used to taking faith to be lack of reason, lack of understanding, just belief and emotion and slavery. But he said, but what was this understanding? What does it come from? He says, two things: knowledge of real knowledge about events in the past, plus personal experience. And I'll leave you to reflect on it at this moment. Why this insistence on real knowledge of the past? This played a great role in his life and his work because he introduced another idea, a throw in here, which he gave this strange name to, of legomenism, a notion that from the past there were things which could be transmitted into the future. Uh, Very likely he took this idea basically from the Tibetans and their teaching about the treasures, which, it was acknowledged that very wise people in the past created things, sometimes actual artifacts, which were only then going to be discovered in the future by people who could take use of them and make use of them in that future where there was a need. And this has more subtle versions, and that it's done not with artifacts, but with just the mind itself when new teachings get arrived. And in Sufism, you get a different kind of interpretation of this in the figure of El Khidr, the green man, who can introduce novelty into the tradition. So these things, they're about the past. You think it's quite strange, and I want to put into your mind, um, plant the idea quite blatantly, that something about maybe something about the works which Gurdjieff created that have this kind of intentionality behind them. And this is a speculation on my part. I'm not privy to it. It's true. There's something in the movements which could be taken not entirely in terms of there's this man who invented or produced something and put it into these things. And so we're looking to the past, but also look to the future. And I myself have made very much meaning and substance for myself about the idea which he conveyed to Orage, that is Gurdjieff to Orage, about his first book, Beelzebub. He said this is for the future, but he gave the particular meaning for it, that the future for artists, you say, who might take from Beelzebub some elements of meaning and for the creation of their own work. And this is very much a thing which inspires me and appeals to me because he's not he's conveying the sense that it's not something fossilized. He's not, and we think about things in the past, we can think of them as fossils or just relics or ruins or things. So on. Now, one more thing to say about this concern with the past is that uh, it's Gurdjieff was part of a general movement or trend in Europe, in particular, which is away from regarding the people of the past in this naive way, and with a naive idea of progress and evolution and so on, treating them as feeble-witted, so to speak, lacking of intelligence and all the rest of it. And there's the reverse understanding which began to grow more and more, and with those has been associated with the so-called esoteric line, that there were things in the past which have been forgotten, which were in a sense more advanced. And there are many examples, like I say, I might manage to mention a few particular movements, things which are more recent, a lot of people are now realizing that they can be a much lower quality than things which are older, and that things retrogress as much as progress, so much so that they say maybe they balance out. And Gurdjieff said there is no progress whatsoever. So going back to the past, I want to refer to another aspect of the movements in Gurdjieff's interpretation, and that is he said that we shouldn't treat them just as entertainment or display. Like you can tell, I could consider the most dance forms and so on, they were really considered as sex or war or something like that. No, they were, he said, like books. And people think this is a very strange idea, and it's just a fantastical idea of his, but it's not so, really. He gave the example himself of a country dance, which contained a recipe for jam. And there was a recent work by a very remarkable woman called The Memory Code, about looking at the importance of the collective memory of people, uh, to be known and recognized and treasured, and how this was given to people who created or were involved in the creation of such things, even as Stonehenge and the rest of it, as mnemonics, as ways of remembering, which most of the modern interpretations completely miss because they don't get that sense of a community. But that's beginning to know, like with Stonehenge and Ireland and Wales and Scotland, the whole, the British Isles, obviously now it's emerging as a community interconnected in certain ways. Anyway, all this portrayal of or accessed people in law was done by people who had to be specially trained in the past, and then historically it was often taken by people who ruled over and governed people because they got the guns, so to speak, and it became more and more an age of violence. So that is the thing. But I wanted to mention one thing, and I probably have to stop here because I can see the time going on. And that is the wonderful example of what could be contained in dance. Uh, and it comes from the writer of a Roman writer, I think about the third or fourth centuries, I'm not sure now. And he was a writer on the social customs he and phenomena he saw around him. And it's very interesting material. But one thing he spoke of was that there was known, renowned at his time, a dancer. And this dancer could dance the Pythagorean doctrine. And he was known for this, revealed for this. But you see, that's that side of it. But it says the audience which saw the dance and so on, and even the dance itself didn't themselves ever understand this doctrine, but they knew the following. They knew if the dancer made a mistake, that he had made a mistake. Still, there's a mystery there to look into. But get this notion, it was then accepted that somebody could dance a complex doctrine and a whole series of ideas. And strangely enough, in our own time, this is being in some way revived because you've got groups around the world now who are doing such things as creating dances which express ideas of physics, even of quantum mechanics and so on. Now, I just now rushing, seizing hold of some time to give a little picture of why I was thinking, which I didn't say, a subtitle for this introduction, and that subtitle would be From the First Obligatory to the Number 39. Now, this is to speak about this span of creativity of Gurdjieff's work with the movements. And it began possibly, it's the very beginning of the 20th century. There's a lot of ambiguity because Gurdjieff was not very accurate or friendly in his giving information about himself. And when he went to Russia in 1912, and he began to spread his ideas, and he went to Russia as a millionaire. But then his timing was absolutely abominable because in 1914 you had the World War, and in 1917 you had the Bolshevik Revolution. He lost all his money, eventually had to leave the country and so on. But at that time he was broadcasting this idea of ballet, of the struggle of the magicians, which he went on working with for quite some time. And nothing remains except the scenario, the sort of the outline script of it. But 6 pieces of music. Also, I think the beginnings of some of the movements, and which I believe he actually went on right towards the end, preserving something of this teaching of the movements. Then the other thing I need to remember is remember to say to you, and that's about the Enneagram. So I think it's Jason figure 3. Let's see if I'm correct. And I really do have to bring this to a close because our time is running out.
Yep.
Are you all right?
I'll share it now.
Yes, yes, the Enneagram one, does he? Yes, that's right.
Oh,
This is I'm
we have.
so I've so badly managed my time. Do forgive me, but this was see the people who know can make out there's the figure of the enneagram on it, and this was something that actually Ouspensky describes in his book about the teaching and so on. At the prairie, which he first saw this dance, and he was interested by it. Because the strange thing about, or the particularly intriguing about it, that Gurdjieff was saying at this time that in order to understand this enneagram, which encapsulated a lot of his cosmological thinking and so on, it would be necessary to do the movements. And so this is a reflection of his three-centered approach to understanding. You can't just take a book and read it and understand. That's a kind of almost misunderstanding if you just take it intellectually. But this is me. And if you can make it a picture and you can get the impression that these figures are dancing through the design themselves, but he brought this scheme of the Enneagram into many of his dances, where they're usually called multiplications. And so the first image you saw, the prayer of six, actually does reflect the Enneagram itself, but it reflects these inner lines put into this form, which is able to be incorporated in complex dances. Now, just really, I am feeling so apologetic. I'm going over time so much uh, to come to these periods of the change in the way he was designing these movements. A lot of people know there are about 200 or so movements, and they're varying different content. And some of them are to dervish dances, some to prayers and rituals, others to so almost like psychological insights. And there's this, which would be touched upon by Elan possibly with number 21, which has the subtitle Remorse of Conscience and so on. But as he got toward the end of his life, remember, it did this extraordinary period when during the war, when I don't know how it was possible, he would have meetings with people, and extraordinary, and these have been preserved, and they contain some of the most remarkable inner exercises he ever devised. And also he was creating movements. And probably that this last series of movements, which he got towards the end of his life, called the series of 39, that even the numbers from 1 to 4 were created during the war, but the others afterwards. And the very last movement, called this number 39, is said to have been created just 2 weeks before he died. And it was a wonderful culmination of all this. But as he went on in this last period, it's known that these dances, which obviously looked like things taken from other systems and ancient systems and traditions and so on, became more and more abstract and refined, and they became more and more patterns. So what were they conveying? And some of us have joined together and got this question, what are they conveying? What are they for? Well, let us assume that in some way they are for us, uh, and open the possibility maybe trying to convey something, and that we are this later generation of people who can be brave or arrogant a little bit and say, well, perhaps we can have a go at working out what these movements mean because they contain something important for us. And I'll end with a little personal anecdote. It came from a dream I had while being in a transatlantic flight. And in this dream, I was walking with Bill Gates. You know, at the time he was still running Microsoft and so on. And I was like a journalist talking to him. And I said, oh, Mr. Gates, what do you think is the really embodies the cutting edge at this time? And he paused, and this is in my dream on the ceremony, and he said, the movements. So I want to leave you with that fantasy of mine in my dream that people might regard the movements as something belonging to the past and so on. But I think there is some possibility that they're there and there's a need to preserve them because we can actually aim or hope uh, to be able to read something about what they really mean. Apologies again for going over my time, but thank you very much. And the next thing we're going to be involved in is in the hands of Travis, a very accomplished dancer with great knowledge of traditional dances in places like Uzbekistan, and she will give us an experiential insight into this element of the combining of gesture with inner feeling and inner meaning or inner experience, which so much permeates the movements, but which comes from outside Gurdjieff's canon as such. Let me pause a minute and hand over. Thank you very much to Travis.
Thank you, Anthony. I'm most honored and humbled to present a little bit for you all today. I love how sometimes in life, after years of gathering experiences and objects and books and bits of information, a moment comes when some of our wild and apparently incongruous pieces come together and we see a pattern. And the pattern informs us and enlightens us. And such a thing happened to me. I grew up in the dance, and I have followed sort of renegated Sufi traditions along the way, and practice of zikr. And in 1992, I was invited to Uzbekistan to study classical dance. And it was quite an experience. I have a photo of proof here. This is me dancing in Bukhara in 1992 at the Nowruz festival in the spring. I was doing Middle Eastern dance at the time, and I only knew the barest bit about Uzbek dance. But then I did study for a time, and this is a picture of a classical dance genre in Uzbekistan. That's me. It's called Tanavar, and it's from Eastern Uzbekistan, and it's this traditional dress. Usually this fabric is used for men's coats, but in Eastern Uzbekistan, it's used for this women's dance. And it's called Tanavar, which is, there are a number of different interpretations of the word, but they have to do with strength, with longing, with a tree, the strength of a tree. The dance traditionally invoked women's longing, women's suffering. And when I learned the dance, there was definitely a feeling of reverence and seriousness and inner contemplation with it, sort of. And it's a dance about the woman in her garden waiting for the beloved. And she's not sure when he's coming or which direction he's coming from, but he's coming. And now the most current beautiful recordings of the dance, it's very much external. The woman is beautiful. She's inviting and cheerful, and it's a different mood entirely. And this was in 1992 when I was studying there. So our subject here is about the meaning of the movements. I'm not versed in Gurdjieff movements, although I've had a little bit of experience with them. And I had, from a lifetime as a dancer, I did have a number of observations and questions and feelings about understanding what I was seeing. But it was clear that it was not something to talk about, which I do understand from other traditions where the Native American dances are very much that way. You don't ask questions. And sometimes questions answers elucidate and inform and open the windows, and sometimes they create a different kind of a veil if you have too many answers. So anyway, with that in mind, I've been studying a lot on my own parallel about meaning and movements. And let me move my computer here a little bit. I was introduced to an exercise a long time ago from a friend of mine in a Zikr circle that we had called The Journey of the Hand to the Heart. And it moved me deeply, and I've used it occasionally since then. And now a lot of things are coming forth in studies of, well, let's see, I have a whole table full of quotations here, but Carolyn Miss says, we're beginning to discover our bio-spiritual ecology. We're beginning to understand that that there's, she says, we have now reached the point where the fundamental tenets of our religion are colliding with the mystical needs of our bio-spiritual ecology. We have a body, not just a mind, and we have a heart. And all these things are biomagnetic, bioelectromagnetic field. And there's a teaching about the field. Einstein said the field is the sole governing agency of the particle. From this field, we manifest our life. So this little practice I will share with you. I found these two things this morning. I thought, oh, this is a hamsa. I'm sure many of you would be familiar. This one's from Morocco. It's a beautiful silver hand. And sometimes it's called the hand of Fatima, the hand of Mary, the hand of, there's any number of people in it's named after. And it's ancient, found in all across the world in different religious traditions, as a sign of protection, as a sign of intelligence, a sign of depth, and then sometimes it's called the hand of the mother. And to me, it's the hand of intelligence, of the amazing miracle of our hands. And if you just hold your hands in front of you, and just look at them for a moment, and they're empty right now. And just quickly run through the images of the things that your hands have done just since you woke up this morning. Maybe they washed your face, they helped you put your clothes on, they worked together in countless ways without you even thinking about them. They maybe washed the dishes, they fixed your cup of coffee, they brushed your teeth, they drove the car, maybe they did all these things. They work as a partnership. And they have each, in some traditions, like in Morocco, there's all kinds of astrological and mystical meanings of each finger. And of course, in acupuncture, all the fingers all have different access to different organs and different meridians in the body. The human hand is an instrument that's unique in our life, in this reality that we're living in. And we associate the hand, of course, in a lot of the Eastern traditions, we put the hand here and bow, which is where we're going here. But it's with the hands are the servant of the head. The head guides the hands. And so I think of the hands as representing the head part of this exercise. Now the heart, and this amused me because I had this is a big quartz rock that I dug up in New Mexico many years ago. It was peeking out of the ground with one little piece, and it was shining in the sun. And I dug it out, and it just said to take it with me. I don't often do that, but I brought this rock. I live in Tennessee now, and this rock has been missing for, I don't know, a year or two. I kept thinking, where is that quartz rock? This rock in the dark, if I strike it with something, it'll glow electric light. If I strike it in the night and touch it like with another rock, if I strike it with another rock, it glows with an electrical pulse. And this morning I found it in the corner of my room under a little old prayer bench that had a rug over it and something in front of it. And if you see, it's built a lot like a heart. Anyway, it just was a gift to find it this morning on this particular subject. And on the subject of the heart, recent work with the heart, which has always been kind of a mysterious chamber. It has 4 chambers and it pumps, and the blood goes in and the blood goes out. But a man in, I believe he's Spanish, Dr. Francisco Torrent Guasp, started really looking at the structure of the heart, and he looked at many, many hearts. And there is a video that you can look at with this, and he found a seam very much like this little seam here. And he took a cow heart and softened it, boiled it, and then he pressed his thumb into that seam and began unwinding it. And he had to unwind it and follow the muscular fibers to the root and then separate them out. And what he ended up with was a long muscle that was coiled into a spiral. And it coils in and then it bends around and coils back the other way. It's extraordinary. And you can see a video, there is a video of him unwinding it and showing how that is. And the heart itself is biomagnetic, bioelectric organ. That's how it works. It has its own intrinsic nervous system. It has been discovered that there are 40,000 neurites in the heart that are like brain cells. The heart has its own little brain. And so this gesture, in my current understanding, helps to connect the brain and the heart in that way. And we use this gesture all the time. So for a few minutes, we're just going to contemplate that. You sit comfortably and take your right hand out to the side. And I think you all can hear me still okay. In the dervish turn, this hand is up and open in a receiving gesture. And so we think of all the things our hand has done and all the things it can do and all the ways it expresses itself. And you can snap your fingers and you can do all these amazing things with your hands. Here is our hand. And we're going to slowly bring it to the heart, which is that beautiful double spiraling bioelectromagnetic organ there. We're going to take our time. We're not going to use any music or anything, but we're going to I'm looking at my clock, and we're going to take somewhere between, maybe around 2 minutes to do this. This is a long journey. And so while we're journeying, we pay attention to our breath, just watching our breath and feeling into the hand and all of what it is for us and how it is longing toward the heart. This is the lady in the garden longing for her beloved, which is here. So with your breath and your prayerful mind and imagination, we will take the journey of the hand to the heart. So slowly, slowly, and we will just start now. And we think of, while we're journeying along, if you don't mind me guiding, I think of all the things, the books I have read and the things I've seen in my life, the journeys I've taken, the experiences I've had, good and bad and scary and wonderful, all the things I've learned, the teachers I've had, all the things my hand has helped me with, pencils and typewriters and screwdrivers and big machinery and babies, diapers, and hands of friends, and dancing in a circle, holding hands. And the books it has held. And maybe even it comes to me to say communion cup or bread, food, the food that comes to our mouth. And we're, with our hand on this little journey, we're maybe halfway there. And then we think of the people that we have loved and touched, the people that have touched us and loved us. And as our hand is slowly, 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 it's made the turn now, it can see the heart. And the heart is waiting. The heart that has loved, that has sorrowed, that has kept us going, that just beats slow when we're soft and relaxed and comfortable, and beats fast when we're excited or afraid. The heart that just does not stop. And the hand is just slowly looking at the heart. And the heart is watching the hand, coming closer and closer. They're gazing at each other. All their little neurites and neurons and everything are beginning to line up. And our breath is coming in and out, deep and slow, and full of gentleness and wonder at this human hand and this human heart. Slowly, slowly. We're almost there. The hand is about to arrive at the station with some long breaths, gazing at the heart, and the heart gazing at the hand. And slowly, slowly, gently, and with great, great love, the hand lands and reaches the heart. and stays there for a moment in the embrace of these two wondrous miracles of human body. And the head can bow in reverence and see them united. Feeling the heart beating under the hand. Feeling the hand tingling after this long journey. Let's take 3 long breaths together, breathing in deeply through the nose and just gently out through the mouth. And breathing in through the mouth very gently and lightly. And breathing out through the nose, long breath. And now, for the sake of the hand and the heart together, we take one long, very refined breath through the nose in. And through the nose out. And thank you. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you, Travis. And now going to make a reading from one of Mr. Bennett's books, The Dramatic Universe, which was in sense you could take as his response to Gurdjieff's theories of writing, say, on all and everything. That's a particularly interesting passage for our theme, because in the course of this volume, he looks at language and divides it into 3 kinds of language. One language for what he could function, which is probably in science, say, the language for being, which relates to art, amongst other things, and consciousness, and symbolism, and one on will, one of which is examples he identified with mathematics, strangely enough. And there is a connection between mathematics and the movements. I'm going to just read just a couple of pages from this, where he gets into the significance of the language of will in the form of gesture. And this is what he says about gesture. Every gesture is unique. Bearing its own meaning, it requires neither interpretation nor intuition. Interpretation for function and intuition was for being. Different gestures may be similar, and similar gestures may be repeated, but the uniqueness of the gesture remains its dominant characteristic. The gesture is not taken out of its context, but made in the context. For better, for worse, every gesture is an act that determines the future course of history. The scale of the act may vary greatly. Sometimes it will be very small, and the consequences hard to discern. At others it may be so great that all human experience is changed by it. A gesture is eternal, that is timeless, and yet it reverberates both in time and in space. It is never repeated, and yet it recurs. The uniqueness of gesture corresponds to the uniqueness of understanding. The understanding of one situation cannot be transferred to another. Understanding is always new, because it is always an act of will. And the language of understanding must itself be an act of understanding. In the language of gesture, no word, no act ever means the same thing twice. It is the language of the whole man, and it can be used only by a man who is himself a fully structured whole. The gesture of ordinary men are no more than the automatism of their functions. The meaning of such gestures does not belong to those who make them, but to the universal processes into which they are engaged. We must therefore not be misled by the fact that the gesture is sometimes a sign that belongs to function or a symbol that is belonging to being. Another point that here requires to be noted is that the ascription of gesture to the highest order of language must not be confused with the theory of language that regards its origin as rooted in pantomime. The belief that words are gestural in origin may be valid, but wrongly interpreted in the theories that regard language as having developed from the automatic gestures of the brutes. We must also here refer back to the distinction made at the beginning of this chapter between language, art, and magic. Neither art nor magic are properly speaking language, although they employ both symbol and gestures. Even in the highest language, the gesture stands for the understanding. It is not a mode of action. Nevertheless, in the highest level, language, art, and magic do merge. Experience, communication, and action are separate only when there is a divided will. With unity of will, language or gesture breaks through the divisions of function and being. Where understanding is perfected, gesture becomes a universal language. Whoever perceives the gesture of the perfected individual understands it according to his own capacity, but he is not left untouched. It is this action that brings gesture language more into intimate relationship with art and magic. Communication by way of gesture has different levels of perfection. At its lowest, it depends upon a common context established by common endeavor, but at the highest, the context of the gesture is the whole of human experience. The individual who is capable of making such a gesture is himself a creative power, for the gesture does more than produce the context. It is itself the context of its own expression. I'll leave it there. Thank you very much. For our next component of our little dance here, I'm going to use a video, and this is of a conversation I had with, I think, two people who are hopefully present here with us, Maja Moeser from Germany and Deborah Longo from America, both very profoundly experienced in teaching the movements and experiencing the movements. And the long conversation we had, it took about 2.5 hours, where I took part of it, taking about half an hour. We allowed ourselves to just freely explore what we felt about the question of the meaning of the movements. And I apologize for its format. This is unedited, so to speak. We're just taking a section of a conversation, but it may convey the sense of this intimacy of it, about this involvement in the movements, and where each of us can find their own sensitivity and depth of understanding of what it can mean. As I say, the technical side of this video, which was recorded by a Zoom conversation, is poor, and it is entirely my fault. So I hope you will forgive my excellent companions, and they were very brave in submitting to this completely open-ended, meandering conversation. And I wanted to include it because want you to hear the voices of people who have a great experience in the movements and hear in their own words what they take to be the meaning of this. And again, forgive me for interrupting and leading and being the third party, so to speak, in this exchange, but I felt it's extremely important to enact and exemplify something which I think Travis referred to about or longed for, is having this open conversation between people, and it doesn't have to be dismissed as wiseacring, but that there's something in this talking together which is significant and highly relevant to the work which is embodied in these remarkable movements of Gurdjieff. So, Jason, can we begin with this extract? What are the movements for?
I think to know myself.
What comes to mind is the movements are for working on oneself, are for working with others. Yeah. And yeah.
And there was the third, open-ended one.
How to put that into words? It's like their movements are for creating a space for the sacred that they're named after to come through. Something.
Yes.
Yeah.
And one layer of them is really about creating that space where so much is possible that has no place in normal everyday life.
That's a good description. Yeah.
Say that again. Or can you say it again?
Yeah. Well, in movements, a space can be created which allows different kind of content to come in, which we do not have in normal everyday life.
Yeah.
And everybody will express it a little differently. You mentioned the word sacred. It's a word I often hear. I'm not at all religious, and yet I feel it. I feel that both awe and ease, just to be. There is sometimes there is an experience of truly being in different worlds. And realization comes afterwards. When it's happening, it's normal. It's just matter of fact and
matter of
has a
fact.
clarity about it, and
Hmm.
no big noises. It's only afterwards that we can see how very special that state or that visit to another world was. I think that's one of the purposes.
Well, I say bravo. I like your expression, visit to another world. This is a strong and immediately appealing statement. But it's raised, this part is raised, this part about it is vaguely to do with questions about meditation and yoga and so on. Because I say, make this generalization, ordinary people think if they're going to get in touch with themselves, they must be in a very quiet place and not distracted, not engaged in anything, and calm their thoughts and everything, and be, that's the whole thing about this. I think is atrocious meditation cults which are going around, and it's all about removing distraction, removing effort, and all of that getting to space. And Gurdjieff, like, I'll tell a little apocryphal story in a moment. It says to hell with all that. He does this other way. You're so totally occupied that something can change, but it's quite the different approach. The usual approach is reduced, quiet, support. Go on.
I think it's about conquering one's own attention, to make attention my attention.
Wow.
I think it's about slowing down the inner noise in ceaseless mental talking or emotional regurgitation.
Well, isn't the basic approach there, in place of all that rubbish going through one's head, one actually focuses on something complicated to do, which takes its place. And then it's your own volition then involved in it, that sort of thing, isn't it? Because I also remember, it may seem absolutely irrelevant to you what you could say, but I hope it doesn't you entirely. I still remember certain instances in my life, like we're going to see lectures by Iris Murdoch, and this wonderful English philosopher and novelist and so on. And I come back with a friend in the work, Anders Lloyd, so I was driving through London traffic. And I found when I was driving through the traffic, I was more clear about what she said in the lecture. And I really got the sense if we sat down in nice armchairs, and said, let's discuss this, it would be pallid or weak or something, but that driving, so there's that sense, I mean, it's a common thing which people realize, that sense by becoming more active, you're more open, things fall into place. And it's something to do with the three centers thing, because it's that most of the time you've got to have your moving center occupied with something, or it's just going to do all this which Gurdjieff talks about, the fidgeting and the wasting of energy and so on, because it's got nothing given it to do. And so the devil always makes mischief for idle hands. So you occupy the centers, but I really fixed on this notion you try to do everything, to be totally occupied with this movement which you're doing, which is everything. And you could get you get a point of experience essentially where you see something's coming into you, and it really breaks that attention. And I found it in a certain way. Forgive me for introducing this theme, but when I was doing the recordings, especially of Beelzebub's Tales, and so you think, well, so I began to see them as, in a sense, my work at movements, because the speaking was itself the movement, the articulation, and I could see how certain kinds of things to me would throw me off. I started making mistakes, and others, what was right, and it was the only way to learn those things by being involved in doing them. So I think, I think you're suggesting in the movement, there's actually I like the word an old friend of mine, Jarrell, used for the inner exercises. He called it lab for short, for laboratory, because Goethe is providing an actual workshop instead of just sitting around on one's backside dreaming about it.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Once people recognize that they're just preoccupied with their inner talking all the time, and that
Right.
they're not really there, because they're inside, but they're inside in a not very
Yeah, I would say, that sort of thinking actually encompasses you and drives you, and you're nothing.
yeah,
You're
yeah,
just
yeah, yeah. So recognizing that and learning to find a way out of that,
yes.
that's a huge thing.
I like to, I tend to approach that not as trying to find my way out of it, but to realize that my staying in it is keeping a certain door closed. And I want that door to be open to, to I would like to be a receptive human being. And so all those kinds of attachments they just keep the door locked shut. So I try to, I get caught up in it like everybody else, but then I remember, boy, you sure have that door slammed shut, and I, try to relax the centers, breathe consciously, and just be in a state of receptivity to whatever meant to be.
Yeah, yeah.
Now you're expressing for me an image of the movements as portals. The word English word portal. I love. I think it's got the resonance of the word portal rather than door. It's something where you can go through, and it's just lovely. Joe was given to the almost, if I may be forgiven, a sort of science fiction flavor about really literally passing into another world. You have to go through this portal, but this portal is made of magic. Something.
Well, there is something about magic or magical about movements where they can take us.
Yes, where they can take us. I was going back now suddenly to the struggle of the magicians.
But you froze up. What did you say?
I've gone back to thinking about the struggle of the magicians. The ballet. He went on quite some years saying he was going to do, and he was also sort of creating things like movements in it, and some of the music, and having sort of. I was very curious why he went on with this. Well, I'm just thinking of this thing because I started from an association from this called about magic, and magic you get this thing called passes, you do with your hands and this kind of thing. And I was literally because I just suddenly saw, so much all this stuff in the movements, you actually do with the arms, what he does to the arms, it's so extraordinary. Just very simple gestures, but how they produces these subtle variations in the most extraordinary way out of their simplicity. And I think, well, could treat it as, this is because I picked up a few times, but then forgotten about this, some kind of traditions about the hands, that the hands are really so sensitive that they can go in advance into the other world, just doing this. Actually, it's a real action of going through the world. It's not just in external air and space and so on. So there is a really interesting avenue here, because you could say, well, why are they doing all this, hands and this and cross and up and this and that and the other and the and something I was like occasionally I got a few clues myself from a clairvoyant and a memory chap and so on about this, but you like to look at, well, is there something between the hands? Is it something being you're actually working in something? You're not just a stick figure there gesticulating, like this, but it's actually there is something being woven because there's something about Gurdjieff's approach to spirituality and so on, which is very concrete, very physical, very tangible. He actually deals with energies in a kind of almost physical, like pouring things from one place into another in some of his inner exercises, and the way in which he would do such things as energize uh, water to cure people and that kind of thing. So here is a extraordinary things which I hadn't realized. I think because Gurdjieff is distinctive in many ways, but this is one of which really almost troubles me. He's he's always very concrete. He's always talking about substances, not kind of patterns and not kind of abstract ideas at all, but it just go on. Yes, yes.
Deborah
Weighing.
brought that gesture up from the Untamed of number 11.
Yes.
And to me, it was always a little plume, the end of feathers of a bird, the very tiny, soft ones.
Oh, the down, we call it here.
Down, yes, that you have in your hand. So they need to be cupped enough that it can stay there. And to me, it scales of mud, the Egyptian.
Oh, yes. Yes, yes, yes.
And Pierre and Vivian one of the two of them used to talk about holding a precious orb.
Mm-hmm.
You're holding precious. So if if you're not embodying the gesture the way it should be, then it falls, the precious thing.
Yeah. As soon as this idea is given, something changes.
Yeah, you got to have the idea.
Yeah, in the presence of the hands.
It doesn't change with everybody.
No, not with everybody, but
And
with some it really. Yeah.
Or this. Do you ever notice that? This gesture, like backwards?
Yeah.
And
I wanted to just say something. You mentioned the word clairvoyant, Tony.
Yeah.
I didn't catch what that was all about, because I didn't understand what you were saying. But as far as that subject goes, and this may seem a little woo-woo out there.
Goody.
Well, when James Tamarelli invited Avram and I to do these 10-day movements intensives with him in the 90s, early 90s, it just wasn't being done. You do movements like all day long for 10 days. And,
yes.
and James had actually started doing movements weekends, where he would teach movements all weekends, and that was never done. I mean, we'd have maybe one class a week, as a resident at Claymont.
Right.
He was like the pioneer of these intensives. And so when I think it was the very first one that we did, something doing movements all day long with a group of people was, I probably wrote about it in one of my many journals, but there was something special about it enough for me to bring a question to this clairvoyant. She's a woman that I've known for decades, who is very reputable, and she does channeling. And so back in the 90s, I would maybe see her once a year. And I asked her about, well, first of all, I was banned from doing movements after making that decision because Susan Thompson forbid me to do that. And so I remember weighing before I said yes or no to James. I said, um, I said to myself, okay, what does it feel like going, and what does it feel like staying and not going? And it was like
Uh,
I, I had this vibrant feeling of life going and a feeling of death staying. So I went, and of course I was that's an aside, all of that I was banned from movements for a while. But so I brought the subject up to this clairvoyant, and she one thing she said that had a big impression on me was she said this intensive work on the movements um, creates, she just called it a grid work of light that hovers over the area, that the energy from this grid of,
wow.
yeah, creates this grid work of light, because we're a grid in the Rosen files, but she just saw it as a beneficial thing that, would hover over wherever we happen to be. And so that's when I started thinking about movements being beneficial for more than just that. Contributed to the whole audience thing too, a reason for doing
Yes.
that.
Yes.
I
Yes.
take it even further. I
Pardon?
I I would take it even further because it is good for the whole earth.
Oh, well, yeah, and
It may only be a tiny something, but
I did evolve into this is a bigger thing than just that one place. And
yeah.
There was a dual clairvoyant, one of those clairvoyant which Karen Stefano also knew, Phyllis.
right.
And really liked her. She was a wonderful character, drunk all the time, so speaking, but acting brilliant. And we went through one of the obligatories, and well, just briefly, one of the things she brought into view was that, when people are doing the movements, it's all kind of restricted to, this body in this position doing these gestures, and that's it. But she raised the whole thing of being aware of what world one is in and seeing this world. Like, you look, so it's very important how you're looking because there's something to be seen. You're in a landscape. Now, that idea, simple idea made a lot of difference to me because usually you don't get the sense of being in the landscape at all. You're so occupied in trying to do the fucking thing, whatever it is. But you see the difference. You're in a world, so it's that you're in this world. There's something tangibly in the world around you which you take into account, and you've raised now something really, I think, radically important because it's then getting out of this being locked into this person here, this perspective in this location, and what's happening is what's happening to me, into the world. And oh,
Yes.
that's gone.
I was with Karen once when I don't remember why we went out to the Northwest, but that's where Phyllis was, this clairvoyant. And we stayed with her for a few days, and she had she had me do the first march, second obligatory. It was step by step, and she
Oh,
just
she did that. You never told me.
she has Karen had the notes. I never got the notes. Because I can't remember what she said. This was like decades ago.
Hmm.
But every gesture, I did the whole thing. I did it piece by piece, and she did her psychic evaluation of what it all
Yeah,
meant.
yeah, yeah.
But if anybody still has those notes, it would be Karen. I mean, I meant to get them from her, and then I never did, or I meant to, and
Yeah,
then
something like that. So, yeah, those things. Yeah, I really took. I took what she was saying. I went through. I think it could have been the first March, but that was a long time ago, and I didn't take the notes. But it was something which I took
Karen
seriously.
with you. Maybe Karen shared those notes with you.
Well, no, because I was with Phyllis when I was
Oh,
doing
she
it.
did that one too.
Yeah,
Okay.
oh yeah, I think it was that one. There's this little. Oh, I'm trying to remember. It was. I'm
No.
trying to. Yeah, I know. I think it's a march forward. What was the first gesture? Oh,
Oh,
it's
march forward or the first
then it's
march?
back. Uh, uh,
Um,
It's
uh,
the first march.
that's it. That's it. It's all about. Yeah, exactly. And like this one, in a sense, the obvious way to describe it to you, said it's like uh, there were lines going down into the head, and this was cutting them.
Oh, wow.
The image is from puppetry. It's cutting off the puppet strings, attaching you, and this kind of thing. But you could also say, well, this is the work of imagination. But I just echo Mr. B. Sometimes says imagination. It's not just imagination. It's just imagination. But it doesn't mean it's unreal. There's something there. But this is beautiful. I mean, most people doing movies will probably take this as scandalous, actually taking into account the clairvoyant visions of somebody who's not in the work, so to speak, and it would be dismissed. And I don't think so. It, I think we should bring everything we can
mhm.
to bear on it from our experiences, from what we've gone through it, and people we've met, and other people. I'm just adding a slightly different thing because it's in my brain ticking away here about the gestures and the hands. I always love this. You get this sometimes this gesture here. You see, because I remember seeing this gesture in Istanbul, Eyot. The mosque is just outside Istanbul, and you got shrines around it. And there was this newly married couple in front of the shrine doing this, which is taking the baraka. But that's what I meant about Gurdjieff being physical.
Mhm.
They're actually taking this substance around it and pouring it over themselves. And I've always had that association since I saw this couple in Istanbul doing it in front of a shrine. Then it totally changed what this gesture meant in the movements for me. Because you actually taking a substance and pouring it through yourself. And there is this wonderful exercise that Joseph showed me about the astral Keshan body, where you actually activate the Keshan body, and then the hands of this body go through your physical body, bringing a different quality into them. That's one of the wartime exercises, and I was very grateful to Joseph for showing me that. So suddenly you find all this, and when it's in front of this kind of dilemma, but it does all this about you is taking us out of just concentrating on me. I'm me. I'm trying to do these movements. That kind of is really taking you out of that and to say, look, with others and in a world. And then for me, experientially, in my tiny life, there's a sense of recognize really I'm in the world is the rarity. Because I'm going along and I'm occupied with my little affairs and the story I'm telling myself. That's occupying me. What I call the ongoing pathetic soap opera of my life, occupying me. Instead of saying, and even now, I'm looking at you now, suddenly I'm aware there's this room. And this house, and you might think, well, everybody's aware of the room. And I say, no, not in this way. There's something about this, and has this taste of objectivity, and it's like the basic requirement is getting out of the way of one's own shadow, uh, something like that. But so what you were saying, Deborah, about I don't know, which conveyed to me this sense. I love that thing about the grid. Uh,
Right.
it's, yeah, because this is so suddenly all this thing is to do in relationship to something. It's not you standing there just doing this as if it's pretty, but it's actually because something's really happening. And I really hardly ever dare to think like that because I think it's something nice to be looked at and nice music and so on, but not this actually you're weaving spells. I can put it in a silly way, kind of thing. Oh wow, I'm on the blow away because it really makes me feel okay about taking Bennett's theory and my manifestation, all this blah blah kind of stuff, and then seeing well, you can begin to take it seriously. And it's also not far away, you know. One can engage in it, but engaging in it is quite a needs quite a kind of discipline in a way, quite a sensitivity. You just don't, you know, like you were saying, I don't know for what you said about it, where you were slamming the door or something like that. You know, you can see.
Portal, the door to the port. You called it the portal. I called it.
Yeah.
There's a door there that needs to stay open if I'm gonna
That's,
be.
yes, that's right. Then you could suddenly realize it's the whole Gurdjieffian thing, which ordinary people, if I may say so, don't accept. You know, like you said, we're not conscious and mechanical and all that blah blah blah, which if you said to ordinary people, they go and kill you. But it's actually true. It's actually true, and you suddenly touch this world. You know, life is only real then when I am, and all that kind of rhetoric he had, which I often get annoyed about, but it's so on the ball. You know, you see, and you said something about Maja said something about when you reflect back on certain deep experiences, they're quite straightforward, quite ordinary. You don't go gaga about them at all. You just say, okay, that's, but because these things which people take for granted they're doing, they're not doing, they're imagining it. They're not doing it at all.
Mhm.
And I used to sense this, you know, like people, Bennett were going about standing in the first position and say standing and suddenly ranting on and about the something. There's occasionally you do it and you suddenly realize he's not just bullshitting.
Yep.
So,
There is another point about this position, whether moving or not.
yeah.
Many take it so close to the head. They're afraid of giving it some space. It's as though, no, I cannot leave my head.
Oh, wow, you see there.
I'm often telling them what, in my experience, they often go too far away from the head.
Well, that's sort of up here.
I meet both, but
Oh, yeah. Really,
yeah.
yeah. But I mean, you get to paying attention to things like this, which ordinary people never do, about the moving of the hands, the relationship to the body. Hardly anybody pays any attention to it. Because why? Because the hands are occupied in grabbing things, in doing things, and so on. And they have this other side. And I can't say any more because I've only picked up a few shards of information and books and so on. But these are our exploratory sense. You know, the hands have got these massive number of nerve endings in them, you know, and they're very, very sensitive and so on. But this is how you explore. But again, you're exploring something. It's not just in a vacuum space in an abstract at all. It's actually something. So I'm getting this weird feeling about the movements now. God, oh dear, I never knew this was there. Yeah. But to part of, I think, well, I'll state this, the problem with the movements is because people have not got I'll call it the right way or an acceptance or the belief in of talking to each other about these things. And I think it's very precious if we can talk about these things, but you know, in most conditions of life, you're very careful about who you talk to about what, because there's such um, hurt and cruelty in the world. So you're very, very careful. And so you often end up not communicating with yourself about what these things are because you're so used to hiding them from other people because you know you get near it. You know, if you start saying something like that, you've had experiences probably, you almost get hurt by the people you're with because they dismiss what you're expressing, for example, this kind of thing. So then picking up something Maya was sharing about, you know, you've got a chance in here to enable people to talk about it instead of this attitude like, um, remember our friend Travis, who's in the university, she's a dancer and so on. She sometimes had some sessions with Pierre and Vivian. And when she was talking about what's happening to her and so on, she got really knocked down by Pierre and Vivian. So we don't talk about this. And there are probably a lot of people have experienced something like that. We don't talk about this, which implies you're not fit to talk about these things. So shut your crap. And that's been the attitude, isn't it? And so you go around, you've got this in the hateful foundation and so on. Oh Lord, we are not worthy, and worthy. So everybody shut up. Like when I first was shocked years ago, when I was writing my Enneagram book, and I was in touch with this wonderful man, Christopher, who was secretary of the Gurdjieff Society, which is like the foundation of the Gurdjieff Society in London. And he talked to him, and he said, they never talk about Beelzebub, you see, or anything. It's only about their so-called self-observation, nothing about the ideas. And it's frowned upon. And I said, what? Why are people following Gurdjieff and you're not in a sense allowed to read Beelzebub? Which is what happens. And especially if you read it, you're not allowed to talk about it because you're unworthy. You won't possibly understand it because you're a low mechanical beast, like the rest of us, and you're not allowed to know anything and see anything. So maybe this is just a ranting of mine, but the sense of possibly, as Maja was saying in her circumstance with the Prague group, where she got a lot of years of building up trust and the rest of it, is an opportunity simply for people to talk together. And it's to do with this task, which is so deep and elusive, that is to talk about their inner experience. Which, in the world, everybody's talking, but not about their inner experience, about their emotions and the hates and all the rest, which is not inner experience. Now we are going to go on and listen to Elan, and I don't need to say anything about his enormous amount of work on fostering the music of Thomas de Hartmann. And it's so pleasurable to say, even this year, to know that in the BBC Proms, this violin concerto is going to be performed. And it is very much due to Elan and to Gurdjieff Blum, who's working, and the years of work they put into producing, making known, and performing and putting the work in to share with people. So anyway, not enough from me. Over to Elan.
Well, I think I just want to begin by talking about the pianist for a second, and then I want to read something very short, and then we're going to talk about an exercise that Mr. Bennett gave, and uncovering the language of gesture. All right. So let's begin talking about the pianist. So my own experience when I was at Sherbourne, I arrived late. I was very bad at doing the movements. I was given about 3 weeks to work on them, and then I was put into a demonstration. And after that, I was pretty much sitting at the piano the whole time. I would never really learn a movement completely because I'd be pulled out to play for class. So this was a huge disadvantage. You can say that it was a very sad thing. I never really learned the movements in a very deep way. But there was a trade-off that I gradually became aware of. And that's this, that In the movements class, there are only two people who actually get to watch the movements. And that's the movement teacher, who is mostly involved with communicating the gestures and the inner states and all that stuff, and the pianist. And the pianist has the choice to go off into a dream world, which is, I can't deny that I didn't do that, that I did that, because certainly I did. But also, it gives the opportunity to watch the movements and ask questions. And there was a certain amount of that took place. So that's my personal introduction to where I really come from in this discussion. There was more, but I don't think I'm going to take the time right here to go into on that subject. But I want to talk about what Gurdjieff says, because he writes in Meetings with Remarkable Men, he says two very discrete things about working with the movements. Okay? And I'm just going to read these two little things. This is where he goes to see he goes to the Sarman Brotherhood, and he's observing the dances. This is his first experience with the sacred dance in this place. We don't know what happened before that. In the center of the third court was a large building like a temple, where twice a day, all those who lived in the second and third courts assembled to watch the sacred dances of the priestesses, or to hear the sacred music. Everyone in the monastery knows the alphabet of these postures, and this is a separate place. And when, in the evening in the main hall of the temple, the priestesses perform the dances indicated for the ritual of that day, the brethren may read in these dances one or another truth which men have placed there thousands of years before. These dances correspond precisely to our books. Just as is now done on paper, so once certain information about long past events was recorded in dances and transmitted from century to century to people of subsequent generations. And these dances are called sacred. So I'm just bringing to your attention that this aspect of engaging with the movements, engaging with the sacred dance, is almost completely bypassed at the present moment. We hardly have, there are some demonstrations where people get to watch, but it's very rare. And that whole subject of the difference between watching and being in the class is so different. I have the same experience when I play the piano and I listen to piano music. It's a completely different experience. Different things can be learned. And from the video that we just saw with Maja and Deborah and Tony, you could see the depth of understanding that's come about from working at the movements. But what about the subject of what could be understood from watching the movements? So I should say that in this same chapter, he also talks about the discipline that these dancers, that these young girls had to go through to learn the gestures and the movements. And he talks about this apparatus that they would stand in front of for hours, holding a position until they understood this position completely and had it perfect. And the perfection of their dancing he makes mentions of also. So these two different things are in this same chapter. And I want to bring one other thing that he talks about, but this is from Beelzebub's Tales in the chapter on art. And he talks about, and this is also another fascinating thing to me, he talks about the time in Babylon about 2,500 years ago, he mentions Pythagoras, that the Society for the Adherence of Legomenism is formed. And there's a need for this society to be formed because apparently, these initiates who actually come to something, unfortunately, these are the first people that are killed in all these wars. And they were looking for a means to transmit things to future generations that would not be only dependent upon initiates. And they came up with this thing called art. And these were different kinds of activities based on things that people do, like painting, music, theater, architecture, dance, etc. And that they were going to transmit ideas, information from that important information was going to be transmitted in these dances by means of their variance in the law of sevenfoldness. He was convinced that the law of sevenfoldness is a cosmic law, it will never go away, and if they would put in these, what he called inexactitudes, which were placed in these particular, were placed in places where particular meaning could be later understood, uncovered by people in future generations. And he goes into this a huge chapter, and he talks about not just music and not just dance, but all of these art forms in terms of this. And then he says something very interesting. He says that the only, and I think this is true, I think I'm right on this, you can correct me if I'm wrong, but he seems to say that the only art form that has come down, that is still practiced right now, that has this, is the dance. The dance still has this meaning in it. So you have all this, information, and then you have this strange situation that here is Gurdjieff writing about this, and then here is Gurdjieff composing the dance. Does the question come up, if he's writing about these things in Beelzebub, and he's talking about this being read like books in meetings with remarkable men, is it possible that he wouldn't be putting these, what he calls lawful inexactitudes, into his productions, into his dances? And if so, where are they? What are they? Where are they? So these are questions that, they come up, and they're related to the question of, why, and that why can be followed or it can be squashed. And there is an aspect in the teaching of the movements which says, and it's not from everybody, but it's pretty pervasive, it's quite pervasive actually, among certain circles, that one shouldn't try to understand these movements with the intellect. I've heard it said that we are not Gurdjieff. We can't understand. It's no use for us to do it because we're not Gurdjieff, and he didn't tell us. But I think that if we were to look at this in the two ways that Gurdjieff presents it in meetings with remarkable men, that there's the doing of the movements, and maybe one shouldn't be asking those questions while one is in a movements class. But the watching of the movements, that's a place where this could be engaged. So now, I want to talk to you about, I have to keep an eye on the clock, obviously, but I want to talk to you about one particular movements class that was given at Sherbourne. It's the only one that I ever saw, and I played for, as I said, I played for a lot of movements classes. It was the first class that Mr. Bennett gave to one of the groups on the third course. I never saw it. I never saw him repeat this. And what he was doing was he was showing us the key. He gave us a key, which I now consider a Rosetta Stone, the key to unlocking the language of gesture. And if once you have that, then it opens up a whole world for one to begin to explore. And I want to go through this with you. So you can either do this, I'm going to talk you through this so that you can find for yourself, because you can answer these questions yourself. You could stand up and respond to my directions, or you can do it inwardly. It's up to you. So he began with the right arm. With the right arm, take a gesture which expresses your path forward in life. With your right arm, take a gesture which shows your connection to the higher. With your right arm, take a gesture that shows your connection to your neighbor. And finally, take a gesture with your right arm that shows, that expresses myself. Myself. And after I've gone through these, I'm going to give you one more thing that I've come up with, because you'll see why, that is germane to this conversation. So I'm going to show you what these gestures are that were evoked by these questions. In other words, this was not Mr. Bennett telling anybody what these gestures were. They came from the class. And not everybody, it wasn't 100%, it never is, but it was about 80 to 90% of people gave something like these gestures. So for the first gesture, path forward, connection to the neighbor, arm out to the side, connection to the higher, arm above the head, and for myself, connection to the heart. I'm going to add one, which I've come up with, but yeah, maybe I just wait for a minute. So it turns out that what the class invented, or I don't like to use the word created, what came out of them, okay, were the gestures that are in the first obligatory. Now, the first obligatory, by its name, there are 6 obligatory dances, which by their name indicate that one must know those dances before going on to learn the others, because they set the whole flow. And this is the first of the obligatory. So this is what it is. And the left arm also does these same gestures, myself, forward to the left, okay, and above the head. I think at this point it would be good if we could just see the video of this dance, just the arms, just the slow speed. If we could do that now. That's enough. That's enough. Okay, so you'll notice that the gesture for myself is different in this, and that was the thing that I was going to put out there, because there are two ways of approaching this movement that are considered legitimate. And one of them has a gesture which I don't think it is meant to express myself, but rather my presence. I am here. That's what that gesture is. But anyway, you can see what the pattern is. And for those of you who are among the cognoscenti, you will notice that they did those 10 gestures from the arms to the music of the feet. But luckily, in this movement, the rhythm stays the same. All right, now I want to go on just a little bit more and talk a little bit about what's in the first obligatory, because there is so much information in here. And before we talk about anything specific, I want you to imagine to yourself, if you're right-handed, well, imagine to yourself that you now throw a pencil on the floor, and you imagine to yourself that you pick up that pencil. So you can do that in your mind. And I'm going to ask you, which hand did you pick up the pencil with? If you're right-handed, most likely it's the right hand. If you're left-handed, it might be the left hand, although I don't know because I'm not left-handed. But why I'm going through this is because I believe that there is also an issue in these movements, and particularly in the first obligatory and also the canon of 7, which I would like to get to but probably won't. And that is that the right side of the body you can consider as active, and the left-hand side of the body can be construed as receptive. So when you have a gesture, for example, myself, with the right arm, I am actively being aware of myself. With the left arm, I'm receptive to myself. With the right arm forward, I am actively in my path forward in life. In my left hand forward, I'm receptive to my path in life. So there's a difference in meaning between, there's a big difference in the meaning of what's in those gestures. Now, right, okay, I want to talk about, so that's the arms. The head gesture also, and he never showed the head gestures. He never elicited the head gestures, but once you know the arm gestures, then you can easily understand that the first gesture, by the way, the first gesture is head forward, then down, up, back, right, left, back, and then the head tilts, and the head tilts, okay? And then back. And this gesture of the head tilt, so it's pretty clear, my inner life, what's above me, my neighbor, right? It's pretty clear in those gestures what the meaning is. But the one that's interesting here, which gets clarified in the canon of 7, which is why I wanted to show, one of the reasons I want to show it, is because it has this gesture of the head leaning. Okay? What's happening when the head leans? The ear is now in relation to the higher. The ear is now into relation with the higher. So it immediately brings in the subject of listening here. Okay. All right, I want to just very quickly go into one other thing about this movement, and then I will take some questions if some questions have arisen. But before I do that, I think at this point, all right. No, I'm going to give you some information about rhythm, and then you're going to watch the first obligatory, and you're going to see if you can figure out what the rhythm is. Okay? So, it would be much better if I had people responding to my questions, but because of this medium, I'm going to give you time, and then I'm going to give you my answer. And then if you have disputes, then you can also bring that up into the questions. So, in talking about rhythm, before we talk about rhythm, we start with pulse. What is pulse? So, you may be drawn to the idea that the heartbeat is called the pulse, right? So a pulse is a steady beat. It's a steady, undifferentiated beat. It can be a slow pulse, dum, 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 dum. It can be a fast pulse, dup, bup, bup, bup. But the thing about it is that it's undifferentiated and it's steady. Now, then we come to the next question is, then if a pulse is a steady beat, what is rhythm? What is rhythm? Rhythm has pulse, but pulse does not have rhythm. Rhythm is a pulse with a regular pattern of accented beats and unaccented beats, which becomes number. So you have, for example, loud, soft, loud, soft, loud, soft. That's a rhythm of 2. 1, 2, 1, 2. You can have a pulse. You can have a rhythm in 3. 1, 2, 3. 1, 2, 3. Again, it can be at any speed. The pulse is depending upon what piece of music or what activity it is, because it's not just music. The pulse, but it has to be steady. So we have rhythms of 2. The most common rhythms are 2, 3, 4, and 6. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2. Okay? And the most, have we told people about using what? I can't read that.
The chat for questions.
Oh, right. Chat room for questions. Thank you. No, we haven't. But now we have. So one of the things that's interesting that could be looked upon in observing the movements, the first thing that could be looked at is what is the rhythm of the movement, because there's much more information in rhythm than meets the eye, because rhythm has intrinsic meaning. For example, we say the rhythm in 3, that's basic waltz or a minuet. It's a dance form, right? 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3. It's got a lilt. A 4-beat rhythm is more of a square dance, for example. That's a different pattern. A 2-beat is a quick march. So each of those rhythmic forms have their own kind of meaning. And discovering what the rhythm of a movement is can teach us quite a bit. And we're going to begin with that right now. I think that we're going to, do we have time to go through the entire video of the first obligatory for you so that you can ask yourself what the rhythm of this movement is?
I think so. It's 2.5 minutes. Ready to go?
Let's do it. Okay, so I'll give you a clue. It's not what most people think. Is it 2, 3, 4, 6? Those are the questions. So we're moving very fast. If this was a seminar, I would probably be speaking for a couple hours before we get to the point where we look at this question. So in respect of that, I offer one of Tony's apologies. But I am going to, since there is an actual answer that's not my opinion, I'm going to give you the answer. So this movement is actually what you call a polyrhythm. And that is, a polyrhythm is a situation where you have different rhythms involved in the same piece of music. When that occurs, in this piece particularly, the composer had to choose which rhythm was the most important rhythm and make it predominant for what he considered to be the meaning that was related to the meaning of this movement. And you will notice that in the arms, the rhythm seems to be in groups of twos, because it's 1, this, 2 forwards, 2 to the sides, 2 up, 2 down, right? And the same thing happens with the feet. The feet are also in twos, but the head is in 3, because the head is going 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1. The head is in 3. In addition, It could not be in 2. He could not have chosen 2. Why? Because the arms do not begin on the first beat of this movement, which is what causes so many people who practice this movement to make the mistake of trying to move on the first gesture instead of to stand on the first gesture, which is the first gesture of this movement. The standing human position. I am here now with the head forward is the first gesture. The second gesture is when the right arm goes forward, and the third gesture is the left arm goes forward. So it's in the feet and the arms are in 2, but they're out of phase with the actual rhythm. Only the head is in 3. Now, why is that important to know? Well, if it's in 3, even if it's in 2, even if whatever rhythm it is, there's something about rhythm that is connected to direction. So as soon as you have a rhythm, you have direction because you're moving 1, 2, 1, 2, 1. You're moving to the first beat all the time. And that's another subject to get into in detail at some point. And because rhythm has direction, it changes the idea of what's going on in the movement from 10 discrete atomic gestures to a phrase, to a sentence in the language of gesture that begins with a standing position and ends with the standing position, flows through from this standing position to that standing position, and it gives it a flow, it gives it a sense of direction, and it also gives it meaning, which cannot easily be understood otherwise, in my opinion. Now, let's just look at this. So Hartmann is saying that what he saw from Gurdjieff's movement is the head forward is the center of this movement. So that brings the question, so what actually happens in this movement? What's actually happening? We are going from a standing position, a gesture of standing at the first beat, and you're going through on the 10th beat, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. 10th gesture is back to standing. What's happened? It looks exactly the same because I'm standing here and I'm standing there. But what's changed? The inner world has changed because one has done some inner work to get these gestures. There has been work, and the result of that work is something that is not invisible if you know how to look. Let's put it that way. Now, I'll just say one last thing, and then we'll open up for a couple questions. If you look at this movement in terms of what I first described as the active side, the passive side, the meaning of forward gesture, the meaning to the right, to the left, up above, the down, head down, etc., you can see that each of these gestures has a very different meaning. So while I'm aware of myself, I'm aware of my path forward. While I'm aware of myself, I'm aware of being receptive to my path forward. While I'm aware of myself, I'm aware of my neighbors. While I'm aware of myself, I'm receptive to my neighbors. So it becomes a very complex series of meanings when you begin to unpack it like this. And to watch this movement and to experience all those different things, 3 things, 4 things going on at once, because the feet are moving, the head is moving, and each of the arms, that's 4 things, are going on, changing at the same time. There's all this complexity of meaning in this movement. It's not just a gelatinous bunch of movements, gestures. They all have meaning, and they're all there for us to work on. And this is the work not just of, when watching them, the intelligence needs to be also engaged in this. And that includes all 3 parts of these intelligence: the intelligence of the head, the intelligence of the body, the intelligence of the feeling. All right, now, that's enough for now. There was more I wanted to do, but there's no time. Can you see if there's any questions that have come up with this at this point?
Here's one. Elan, do you have the sense that Gurdjieff's writings have more to offer in how to understand the movements?
In his writings?
Yes.
Well, I mean, these are the places that I just opened to in Beelzebub's Tales and in Meetings with Remarkable Men, that I know that he talks specifically about the sacred dance. I guess I would say the following about Gurdjieff. I remember when I lived at Claymont between 1977 and 83, Pierre would often say that Gurdjieff gave hints. Gurdjieff was incomplete, intentionally incomplete. So he put out these hints in these writings, and it's up to us to explore, to look at his writings. And I'll say something against myself, because that, even though that class that Mr. Bennett gave was so fascinating to me back in 1973, it took me over 40 years to try to decipher the meaning of the feet. Okay, so he only did the arms. He was inviting us all to look at all the other gestures of the head and the feet and all these other things that have come up. And even though I was interested in it, I didn't take it up. And I think I can speak as a representative of many people. This is the way we are. So in recent years, I have taken up these questions, and I've begun to look for meaning. For example, this whole question about lawful inexactitude. Where are these things? As soon as you open yourself to this question, answers come in. And I have to say, one can't be certain that the answers are correct, but things do come in. And maybe I should here give one. Do I have time, Tony, to give one more example?
Sure, go ahead.
All right, because there are 2 other movements that are in this that we have videos of, and I would like to talk about the number 21, remorse of conscience, because remorse of conscience has only 3 arm gestures, and the 3 arm gestures are exactly like that in the first obligatory. So the arm gestures are this, this, and this. That's it. Then it has some simple feet gestures, which we haven't talked about the feet, so I'm going to leave that out now. But the arm gestures, this is forward, this is my path forward. This is my path, my connection to the higher. This is my neighbor. This is remorse of conscience, though. So what does Gurdjieff do that, which is what I consider to be, I'm not going to use that word, something really strange, okay? Something really odd. Gurdjieff puts in a body bend in this movement. So one cannot be connected to the higher because one's doing this. One has to strain to be in touch with one's neighbor, and one has to strain to be connected to the path forward. So the body bend, in my understanding, would be something like a lawful inexactitude, because that's information that he's put into this movement about what remorse of conscience is. When you're in a state of remorse of conscience, you're not connected. The other thing that's very interesting about that movement is that, and I was corrected by Deborah Longo on this one, because I didn't remember what the head gestures were. There is only one head gesture in this movement, which is head forward. And when one is in a state of remorse, there is no way to look away. We only have to face ourselves. So this kind of extrapolation, again, from the first obligatory, because that's related, those gestures are the same as the first obligatory. We can extrapolate that those gestures have that meaning, and he has changed the meaning slightly in number 21 to give it its meaning. The same thing in the canon of 7, in the second gesture, in the canon of 7, the law of sevenfoldness, the law of process, how processes work in this dementia that we're living in. So we have a gesture where the left arm is up, the right arm is like this, and the left ear is pointing up. So this is a receptive gesture. The left hand arm is receptive to the higher, the left ear is receptive, and because of that, the right arm, which is the active forward direction, is brought in. It's very short. It's not long. So that gives a meaning. That gives a meaning to that gesture, which is again based on what we learn from Mr. B about the first obligatory. Now, I have to add, these are not the only gestures. We don't only have 3 gestures of the arms in the movements. There's much more. But what I'm trying to say is that this is a key that can unlock a door to an exploration of this subject. Okay.
There is a third question. There can be a moment in the movements in which one can be free and the movement goes on as it should. What is this?
You're asking my opinion now, because and that's what because I guess there are different ways to take it. What I would say is, just going back to the conversation between Tony and Deborah and Maja, this is a moment where one actually, in a movements class, can go into what Mr. B called a different world. You're in a different world. Things are not, one step forward and one step backwards, dancing around the zero line. There's something more. So you're in a state where something like that happens. That's not a usual state. There's one more question, and then that'll be it. And I'm sorry if I'm not giving you adequate answers. Can you share an example of lawful inexactitude in a movement? Well, I just did. I think that the body bend in number 21 is an example, but I'm going to give you one other one, which I find really fascinating. but people have argued with me about that one, so I can't say that it's definitely. This is just my understanding from my watching. We have the first march, the first march, which somebody took that gesture, you know, this, and they were showing this part over here, and this is a gesture of looking out to the horizon. The arm is to the side, contained. One is contained, and one is looking out to the horizon. It would make sense in the ordinary way because the right foot moves. And the right foot, if one wanted to get closer to what was out there, which is what you'd expect, the right foot would go forward. But the right foot does not go forward. The right foot goes back. So you have this gesture of looking out to the horizon at the same time that the right foot is back. Now, this is the right side of the body, active. As I am aware, as I am looking out, searching, contained, I put my right foot back to be actively aware of my own presence. So here is the first example in the obligatories of dividing, an example of dividing the attention. So my outer world, I'm paying attention to the outer world at the same time as I'm being aware of my presence. And that's all I'm going to give you right now, because I think that giving answers to these kind of things, it opens, one or two maybe, but the rest of them, we all need to explore. We all have the opportunity to explore if we want to. So thank you. That's enough.
Thank you very much, because it would be nice to finish. Well, I have to say two things. What we're going to do next, with Maja to lead us, we're going to go through the movement called Number 39, which was the last in the series that Gurdjieff composed at the end of his life. But I want our audience and so on to just reflect on that. I really hope you want to follow this further, and we've all promised to make it run a bit more efficiently than it did this time, and we do our best. And in a sense, I think even making mistakes has a great deal of merit in it at all. But for the moment, to finish this session, Elan has been dealing with the first obligatory. I like to complete the arc by this, which can be taken to be the last movement, which he composed just, I believe, 2 weeks before he died, Number 39. And Maja is going to take us through it, and Elan is going to play the music for us. Thank you.
Okay. Put yourselves in a fairly upright position, with your hands resting on the knees or your legs, as it is comfortable for you. There are 4 positions. In the first one, we cross the right arm. And the inner work is to become aware, to reconnect, even ponder. My thinking. It's about the thinking center. The second one, across the left arm. Become aware, reconnect, ponder. My feelings. What am I feeling now, this moment? My feeling center. The third position has the head down. Again, become aware. Reconnect. Sense the body. And the fourth position, the head is forward. The hands are back on the legs. All of the three centers, all of myself. And it repeats. Okay, Elan.
So there are 6 chords, right?
Yes.
Thanks to our participants for bearing with us, and we do the best we can. But as I say, in my previous version, attempted this. In some ways, the making of mistakes is so integral to actually learning something. And it's not to justify our mistakes, but it's absolutely true. We have perhaps very exaggerated and unhelpful ideas of perfection and accuracy. We hope to do another session, and we'd like to invite you to ask us things which you'd be interested in following up on, and can send it to us, and we can try and incorporate that into our production of the next session. As you can see already, the subject is very complex, has very different perspectives, and different people have very different ideas about it. But we want to invite all who can to join in the project. It's a project of actually beginning to, just as us ordinary people, engage in these movements and consider what they can possibly mean, and not be afraid of perhaps saying silly things about this or untestable things, but we are in a condition where we can't expect there to be figures around who know the truth and could tell us what to do or anything like that. It's now, as a saying I like to say, there's nobody here but us chickens. We have to rely on each other. And as I said in our video conversation, that is something very precious which is opened up, but sensitive. That is talking about what is inside us to each other. Meanwhile, go well, God bless, and thank you again.